Hello, co-journeyers, and welcome back to The Truth So Help Me Good. I am your host, Barbara Landry, and together we continue to explore some of the bigger questions about this journey we call life, with inspiration from my upcoming memoir, The Truth So Help Me Good. Welcome to episode 11. One of my favorite movie scenes from my childhood is from The Wizard of Oz. It's the part at the end when Dorothy is standing among a group of munchkins wearing a pair of ruby slippers. She is tearfully saying goodbye to her friends, the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion, and the Scarecrow. She is ready to return home, a place that she had been trying to get back to throughout her journey in Oz. The loving, good witch, Glinda, instructs Dorothy to close her eyes and think of home while tapping her heels together, chanting the mantra, "There's no place like home. There's no place like home," while Glinda waves her magic wand above Dorothy's head. In an instant, we see the little cabin once floating through space land safely back in Kansas. We're not in Oz anymore. But instead, Dorothy wakes up in her own bed with Auntie Em and Uncle Henry having been by her side all the while. What I love about that scene, aside from Dorothy's sparkling ruby slippers, which I would still love to have, is the sense of comfort that we get from Dorothy's return home. It is the sense of comfort that we get from home in general. It is the sense that home is a place that is always waiting for us and is a place we can always return to. However, as we all now know, that is not the case for too many people throughout the world today. The following excerpt is from a chapter in my memoir entitled Mopping the Floor. It tells my story of having been exiled from my family home in 1972 when I was 15 years old to live with my Ashkenazi Jewish grandparents. And I quote, "My mother was born the year Hitler marched into Austria, setting the stage for one of the world's most tragic genocides of modern times. Ripples of PTSD washed over the Jewish people, adding to the anxiety that had already seeped into their bones over the course of centuries of persecution. And therein lies the rub. I had come to realize that the comfort of family, food, and ritual was in some ways an escape, allowing us to turn away from the fear and angst that always lurked just below the surface. Einstein said that the most important question a person must answer for themselves is whether the universe is a friendly place or whether it is hostile. And it is the answer to that question that decides everything. The way we choose to see the world and the way in which we experience it." End quote. During the experience of living with my grandparents for a few short weeks, I had the opportunity to observe the impact of that fear and anxiety in a significant way. I had confronted my grandmother to tell her about the abuse I had been experiencing. She looked me in the eye and threatened to mop the floor with me if I was not telling her the truth. I assured her that I was, and I know in my heart and soul that she believed me. I also know that she wanted to help me if she could. I returned home a few days later, and nothing ever came of our conversation. I believe that somewhere along the way, there was a failure to act on my behalf that was rooted in fear. Fear of shame, fear of uncertainty, fear of being wrong. Fear serves as an obstacle to our ability to take action that we know in our hearts is the right thing to do. And even so, we don't do it. This past week, my husband and I traveled to Austria, to Innsbruck specifically, one of the places that Hitler and his army occupied 86 years ago next month, when the annexation or Anschluss of Austria took place. Innsbruck is located in the heart of the Austrian Alps and is filled with extraordinary beauty, with snow-capped mountains, rivers, waterfalls. I don't think I've ever been to a more beautiful place. Our final destination was about an hour and a half away, and we made arrangements with a man by the name of Martin to drive us there from the airport. Martin was a lovely man, probably in his 50s, and was more than happy to share information about himself and Innsbruck. He had been born and brought up there, and his family goes generations back, including the time during the occupation of the Germans in World War II. This was Martin's home, for him and his family, as far back as anyone could remember and beyond. As we turned the corner to leave the valley and head into the mountains, Martin pointed and said, "That is where Hitler wanted to build a dam and create a huge reservoir. The farmers were not happy." I shuddered to think what it must have been like to be living here in this place under the threat of Hitler and subject to the whim of his desires and wishes. I didn't ask Martin too many questions about it, but instead sat back and enjoyed the scenery as we made our way to the mountain where my husband and I would ski for the next few days. We said goodbye to Martin for now and looked forward to seeing him soon for the journey back to Innsbruck. While skiing in the mountains, Tim and I met a lot of interesting people, some from the area and some that had come to work there from as far as Turkey, Romania, and Hungary. People who had left their homes in search of a better life, in search of opportunity. At the same time, while being away from our families, I could feel myself becoming homesick and feeling that longing to return to that place we call home. Before we knew it, it was time for Martin to come and pick us up and take us back to the airport in Innsbruck. This time being in the car with Martin heading to the airport, I wanted to ask more questions. Having been in the environment for a few days, surrounded by the landscape, hearing the native language of German, I had questions and hoped that Martin would be able to answer them. We watched the fog lift off of the Alps in the early morning, revealing blue skies and sunshine as we descended down the mountaintop in Hochgurgel. "Martin, do you like history?" I asked him, thinking it might allow for an unsuspecting opening to ask some of my questions. "Yes, I like history," he said. "I was wondering, Martin, when Hitler came into Austria, how did the Austrians feel about it?" "Oh, they wanted it," he said. "Some of the worst Nazis were Austrians. They were the most cruel in the concentration camps." The meaning behind his words were in sharp contrast to the beauty of the countryside around us. Snow-capped mountains, Villages that looked like they were out of a fairy tale. Small village church steeples lifting up toward the sky. My mind had a hard time reconciling the two. We spoke of the past and we spoke of the present, culture, economics, and politics, careful not to probe too deep or reveal too much. He spoke about the large Jewish population in Vienna at the time of the Nazi occupation, and how there were many Austrian Jews who were prominent in Vienna's commercial, intellectual, cultural, and political life. Among the more famous were Theodor Herzl, Sigmund Freud, Alfred Adler, and Gustav Mahler. He seemed to speak of such things with a sense of pride that felt uplifting. But the reality of what was to come for the Jews in Austria and other places in Europe is a history with which we are all too familiar, and for the longest time in my life, I thought represented a lesson for humankind that would ensure it never happening again. The conversation with Martin changed to bike racing, ski jumping, and other local activities. I sat back and reflected on how such hatred could have flourished here in this place of majestic beauty. What was it that could cause people to turn their backs on others, with feelings ranging from apathy and indifference to hatred and genocide? How and why did that happen? Eventually, an answer surfaced. Was it fear? Looking out at the villages, listening to Martin, this place represented home to the people who lived here. And perhaps the Jewish people and others, for whatever reason, represented a threat to the place the people here called home. Perhaps there was a fear of having what belonged to them taken away, and that fear caused them to act or not act at all. There is a price that we pay for our fear. Perhaps it is succumbing to the very thing that we are afraid of. There is a famous quote by German Lutheran pastor Martin Niemöller. It is about the silence of German intellectuals and clergy, including by his own admission, Niemöller himself, following the Nazis' rise to power. And it serves as a cautionary tale. And I quote, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unions, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." End quote. And now, all these years later, humankind continues to be driven by fear, repeating the same mistakes of genocide and atrocities toward one another over and over again. Our fear continues to escalate. So what is the antidote to fear? As the Cowardly Lion teaches us, it is courage. The word courage comes from the French word for heart, cœur, and means the choice and willingness to confront agony, pain, danger, uncertainty, or intimidation, to stand up for what we believe is right. Home is not limited to a place. Home is where our hearts are, and it is there that we find our courage. I would like to end this episode with a poem entitled Home is Where the Heart Is by Adrian Barnathan. We are a circle where we roam near or far. It is our home. We are home any place we come to be. Just remember, you're with me. Wherever we are home. Wherever we are home. There are times you look so lost. Stand with me and be a part of the home in my heart. Our home is of the heart. Thank you, co-journeyers, for listening. I look forward to being with you again soon. Take care and be